Comincio io? Hello, we are ready to start, so please.
Yeah, let's the internet is
You pass the slides, right? Okay. I was there. Okay. So hello, let's start then the session. Welcome to the CCAMP meeting here in IETF117. So next, please. So just the usual messages at the beginning of the meeting, the note well. So by participating on the IETF, you should know well the rules that are applying to the meeting. So you are aware of patterns, and so please consider the disclosure of them. And also you need to follow the IETF processes. There is at the end of the slide a number of BCP documents that would be recommended for you to be familiar with that, just to prevent any kind of issue. So, yeah.
One thing I'll send you. I'll pass the blue sheet. We have the new version of the blue sheet.
So regarding the IETF conduct guidelines, please be aware that we are here for having impersonal discussions, focus on just technical matters. So please be respectful and have courtesy in the discussions with the different individuals here in the meeting. Next, please. So regarding IETF meeting tips, we are using Miteco tool. So for those that are here in person in the room, use the client for the room for basically for raising hands in case you have any question to comment at the mic. For those that are remote, please use if possible the headphones for improving the reception of your comments here. Next. So as said, well, we are using Miteco. I think all of you are familiar with that, but well, during this presentation slides, you can test the tool in case there is some doubts on that respect. Next. So we would like to ask for any minute taker in case someone can volunteer to take the minutes, help us to take the minutes of the meeting. Also the blue sheet what Daniele already circulated. Also in this case, we will have record the attendance through Miteco. And yeah, just a reminder again about the IPR process. So be aware that you disclose any kind of IPR that could be related to any of the drafts that we will discuss today, or in the group in general. So the details of the session, the link in the agenda of IETF has all the materials, so you can access as well and get all the contents for the session today. Next. And as you can see, we have a very packed agenda, so we will try to be diligent on the timing and please adjust to the allocated timing in just, to be sure that everyone has the proper time to discuss and propose their own stuff. Next. So as a reminder, very important for whatever working group, please use the mailing list for proposing new drafts, for discussing existing drafts, for whatever topic that could be relevant to the working group. So we encourage as chairs the usage of the mailing list as much as we can. Next. Well, IPR process again. So just to remind that prior to move to progress any draft in the working group, we need to do some polling and every IPR should be disclosed. Next, please. And then with this, I hand over Daniele that will go to the details of the drafts. Thank you.
Thanks. So I'll try to be as quick as possible to maybe use a bit more time for presentations. A quick update on the status of the working group. We have a new RFC. Thank you. 9376, which is the GMPLS applicability to OTN beyond the 100 gigabit. We have 3 drafts in the SG processing: the layer 1 service model, the layer 1 types, and the DOTN topology. A number of working group drafts will be presented today, the ones that you can see in the agenda, so I will not spend much time on it. A quick update on the ones that will not be presented. There is the Ethernet client T topology Young model, which has not been updated since meeting 116. Actually, this is due to the fact that it needs to be reviewed and evaluated after other topology models are concluded, like the OTN one, the FlexiGrid one. The client signal Young model, it was updated, but not much work has been done on this document as well. There are some pending issues that are being worked out, like resilience, port layer, etc. And then it should be ready to move forward. Then we have the DWDM interface LMP and parameter and the Young model for parameters. Regarding the LMP, I don't know if we have any. I don't recall receiving any update on that. I don't know if we have any of the authors willing to share something about that. I know that Gabriele is driving that document. I don't know if Gabriele, are you connected? Are you online? Would you like to share an update on the document?
Yes, Daniele, Gabriele speaking. No, there is no new update on the LMP07. Also because we would like to see what are the new, let's say, new fate of this kind of protocols, thanks to the centralized controller and SDN functions we are working at. So maybe this will go forward, but we still need to see what's going on with, for example, ACTN and so on.
Okay, thanks. And regarding the second one, the
second one,
model?
Again, no update, and this could be, for example, a good reference for the pluggable, for example, and then a good matching for layer 0 type if needed.
Yep.
So again, we still want to see what's going on the other draft, and then this will be modified accordingly.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you to you.
I'm moving the slides, but nothing happens. Let's try to close and start sharing again. A stable connection to the server. Okay, we are back. Then Flex Ethernet, Young model. We started we asked for the routing directorate and Young doctor review. This is in preparation for the last call. So once the document will be reviewed, we will be ready to move the document forward. We don't have any update on the 2 drafts that have been carved out from the microwave topology. We still need to understand if the CCAMP is the right place to move that forward. I don't know if you remember, but the microwave topology has been split into 3 different documents. the microwave part has been moved forward independently. Now we have these two documents which are, let me say, generic enough to be carved out from microwave. We started a discussion with the chairman from different working groups to understand where to place them. I don't know if Scott would like to share a bit of information here. Scott, are you connected? No. Okay. I don't even remember if Scott is present or not. Okay. What else? Then we have the path computation models, the optical and the OTN. The two drafts are pretty stable, but they will be able to be moved forward once that the path computation, the generic path computation draft in TIS will be ready. The transport NBI applicability statement is the document that needed to be put on a diet. Both Dan and Italo have been working on it a lot. We have two updates since IETF117, and probably we are now ready to move that forward as well. Speaking of, we have done in the queue. If you want to speak up, please feel free to do now.
Hi, Daniele. Hopefully you can hear me. I just wanted to let the working group know that we did actually issue an update a few weeks ago on the transport NBI applicability statement, and the change was just to reorganize some of the references, if anyone was wondering why there was an incremental update.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot. And speaking about the transport NBI design team, given you have the mic open, Dan, would you like to give an update? I put together some material to explain the recharter.
Yeah, great. So essentially, we're going to update the charter, remove some members, and add some new members. This team will have a side meeting tomorrow between 10 and 11 a.m. at the Golden Gate 4 breakout meeting room. There is also a Zoom available. Italo has posted the details to the mailing list, I think, earlier today. The meeting may not have a significant amount of substantive discussion tomorrow. It's really just sort of introducing some of the team members to each other, talking about the existing work, and trying to kind of scope some of the new discussion. I think one of the more important points will be that the objective of this new design team isn't actually to publish a draft. It will be to create sort of recipes that can be published through the wiki, or maybe the GitHub if we've got some Yang with JSON examples. And it's really about kind of looking at the toolkit that we've got in CCAMP, both what's sort of published as an RFC, what's in the pipeline, how we would use them for a variety of different scenarios. And one of the things that we'll be doing over the next few weeks is discussing the potential scenarios and what the sequence of lists should be in terms of prioritizing those scenarios and then starting to work through them.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. We take the opportunity to have John here. So the team is using an external mailing list for communicating. Would it be possible to provide them with a mailing list? First of all, not to spam too much on the CCAMP mailing list, and second, to have all the discussions being tracked, being available. Is that something, John, you can help us with, or tell us how to do that, how to request it, and we will do that?
But yes,
Thanks a lot. And that's it. We are ready for the first presentation. Okay.
Just a comment, there was a comment from Scott in the chat saying that the two other drafts came out from the microwave will progress from now till Prague meeting. And
I will move the slides for you.
Okay. Good afternoon. The right thing. Good afternoon to everybody. I'm Sergio Bellotti speaking from Nokia. I'm going to report the status of optical impairment aware topology model draft on behalf of co-authors that you can see in the slide and contributors. Next. The main update with respect to the last IETF 116 is that we complete the OMS protection test with the refinement, adding pictures, new very important to understand the context. And the section related is the 2.10.2 of the document. In the 2.10.1 instead, as reported in the second bullet, we add explanation related to how the model is addressed a specific case in which the regeneration happened on only one leg. Then we addressed the comment from young doctors and we complete the suggestion and the comment from them. We also fix some issue that was related to suggestion from Tom Patch that I had the opportunity to thank him for his comments. In the link and the updates, there is the link for what we have done. We have not completed, but we are going to complete after IETF. And then we made an alignment with respect to the measurement unit definition with respect to the RFC 1993 bis. Next, thanks. Okay, as said, we we added a description of how the model is able to manage the case in which you have OTSI single protection with a 3R regenerator in a single leg. We remember that, as explained in the other IETF and already present in the document, in case of individual OTSI, the model present to have the protection, we have two end-to-end media channel path that is associated with a single OTSI signal. In case a 3R is crossing only one of the two legs, or even both, the end-to-end media channel are terminated on both sides of the 3R regenerators. In this case, so the question is that how to associate the two end-to-end media channel path that is arriving at the WDM node that is containing the 3R regenerator. And to obtain that, we have an attribute that is configure termination type that set up as 3R regeneration permit to indicate that the transceiver related are forming a 3R regenerator. instead of terminating the layer 0 tunnel. In case at the WDM node containing the regenerator, we stitch the two end-to-end media channel path, forming the end-to-end media channel path for the layer 0 tunnel. Next. Okay, this is the example, the picture. We have a single OTSI that is splitting in the WDM node 1, the red line, and the associated end-to-end media channel for the leg on top, that is the green one. In the bottom leg, we have a regenerator containing the WDM node 3. In this case, the end-to-end media channel path is terminated on both sides of a regenerator, and we have end-to-end media channel path orange that is stitched at the regenerator with the end-to-end media channel blue at the regenerator. And we added explanation with JSON code below. So in the part of the description of the network topology, we have the list of all the end-to-end media channel path, that is 101, 103, and 104. In the node, we have related to the transponder, related to the WDM node 3, the setup of the configuration termination type is 3R regenerator. So we understand that at that point, the end-to-end media channel has to be stitched. And the last part of the JSON represents the link. So in the case of a regenerator, the end-to-end media channel related to the OMS MCG2 and MCG3 are stitched together. Next. Okay, the status of the draft. We resolve 11 issues from IETF 117. This is the link for the list. And the remaining open, we have 8 open issues still open. But the 3 at the bottom of the list, the last one is not strictly related to this draft, is more related to implementer, and while the draft is not stable as it is the case of the optical impairments. So and the other 2, so the boundary layer 01 and the muxponder are not strictly related to the optical impairment, is more related general layer 0 topic, and this is discussed more in the context of flexible grid call on Thursday. For the other one, there is already discussion, but essentially we have need to update the security consideration suggested by Tom Patch in his mail, and provide the profiling for optical impairment, in the sense that we have optional attributes that is optional because not needed in case of not optical impairment application, but we need to describe the fact that is absolutely required to have this attribute in case of optical impairment application is provided. Next. For the next step, okay, we need to address the still open issue. The Young model is stable, so there is no new requirement that we need to address for the optical impairment, triggering complex Young update. The text has been already refined this round, and there has been also a lot of work for alignment with the ITUT terminology. And our plan is to close the remaining issue by next IETF and be ready for working group last call by IETF117. There is an official meeting any Tuesday from 2-3 p.m. chat, and anybody is welcome to attend.
Okay, before moving to the presentation of the other document, is there anything that could be added to this document before moving it forward? Just making an example. We have now the new work popping up on pluggables. Is still individual contribution, so we don't know if the working group will decide to work it or not. But suppose that's just one example that comes to my mind. Suppose that work will be adopted and we decide to work on that. Will be there any impact on this work?
The model already address also case, so it is also applicable in case of the remote transponder case. So I don't see many difference in this case with respect to the pluggable stack.
So that was my feeling as well, but I didn't think of it thoroughly. So could you please, when addressing the last issues, consider if there are possible impacts from new work on that? Because I mean, I don't want to hold the draft for too long, but if we have some low-hanging fruit, it would be nice to add it there immediately before going to last call instead of writing a BIS 2 months after. Okay.
We can take it for account.
Okay, please.
Okay, again, I'm Sergio Bellotti, reporting the status for RFC 1993 bis. Major update since the last IETF. Also for RFC 1993, we update the Young model according to Young doctors last call review. We fix adding in the Young a new line coding to align with the fact for the problem of to have multiple line coding related to the single application code, ITUT application code. We change, this is what already mentioned in the optical impairments. So we change the type def name for the power in dB because it was wrong. So there is no possibility that it's measured in dB, but in dBm, the power. We align the FEC identities with respect to the old layer 0 type and added new FEC that was not there before. We change the definition of operational mode because there is a request in the issue to have the possibility that the operational mode is unique. So for this case, we define operational mode-based identities and the operational mode as identity ref with respect the base identity. What is needed for the implementers need to implement specific Young model with specific identity related to the identity base that is defined in this model. And then the namespace will assure the unicity, even if you use the same name. Then we clarify one point related to the available nominal central frequency that is not that has to be related consistent, correlated with the reference spectrum width. And so we added the same sentence for alignment that is already present in RFC 8363, clarifying that the available nominal center frequency are correlated with the slot with with m equal to 1. Next. So here is what we change for the operational mode. In the previous version, the operational mode was a string. Now is defined as identity. We define type def for operational mode as identity ref to this identity. The change is made with the intent to disambiguate the potential clash related to the name. So the operational mode identity then needs to be defined in the context of vendor-specific or organization-specific young model. And this vendor-specific module obviously must be supported as capability by the server, so need to be added at the netconf capabilities. And once that is inserted in the netconf capabilities, so the service is able to provide this guidance. For example, you can use this operational mode defined by the different vendors, for example, in the context of IETF optical impairment topology that already use operational mode. Next. So this is the example for what I described by words. So on the left, there is what in the real case is the layer 0 type definition. So we have defined the identity-based operational mode, we define the type def operational mode, and we define the leaf operational mode with type operational mode. And on the right, there are two young modules specific, one for the one vendor A, the other for a forum specific. Anybody has to import the example on the left in which define the base identity, and anyone can define a new identity for 400 gigabit operational mode. As you can notice, both use the same name, but at the bottom part on the left side, we reported the JSON code, and based on the fact that they have a different namespace of the vendor A and forum B, there is no overlapping and clash between the two names. Okay, situation of the open issue.
Quick time check, 2 minutes.
Sorry?
2 minutes.
Okay. So the open issue, we solved 11 issue, and taking into account the priority with respect for a dependency for stable version to avoid slow down the process for eventually last call. We have still 17 open issue, but many of them have been already discussion with the possible solution. So we are we don't have too much, even if the number it seems larger. Next. So the next step is obvious. We wanted to address the issue that are still on the list. We need to review a bit the terminology, and the plan is to be ready for working group last call with possible target for alignment with the optical impairment of IETF 118.
Thank you. Any questions to Sergio? Then we can move to the next presentation, which is OTN slicing.
Okay, good afternoon. This is Iwa, and I'm presenting OTN slicing on behalf of the co-authors and contributors. Next page. Here's a list of major updates. Basically, what we did is there is intermediate layer of models between the OTN slicing and the generic network slicing model, which we call the transport network slice. For this update, we actually merged this model along with the IETF network slice topology separated from this draft, which we're going to present in TEAS that describes the need of having a topology for resource reservation in an IETF network slice framework. So this makes the OTN slice model kind of much simpler, and it's built directly augments the network slice MBI. We also updated a bit of the text description for the type definition of OTN PM threshold value, because there's a we used to have the bandwidth scientific notation, but it was removed from the RFC 8776 BIS, so we got updated accordingly. Some of the authors' affiliations, as well as added missing IANA assignment for the OTN slice MPI. And also there are changes associated with aligning this model with the base model because of the modeling updates in the base model. Next one. Right, so with that changes, the modeling relationship changes from the left side, which has an intermediate layer, to the right, in which the OTN slice model now augments the base model of IETF network slice MBI for the connectivity part, but also to our design, it also augments the separate model called IETF network slice topology and adds OTN technology specific attributes to the topological components like nodes and links. That basically gives it a dual augmentation for that. But there is an issue. Let's go to the next page. Right, so basically this creates a dependency, as we said also in the last working group meeting, that the OTN slice now depends also on not only on the base model for network slice MBI, but also on a draft, an individual draft that is falling on the fate of the TEAS working group. As we said last time, the best option, the preference for this working group is to adopt the IETF network slice topology within the TEAS working group, so that then it will make the OTN slice work built upon two working group drafts. We did not successfully get it done last time, so we are presenting an update of the draft in TEAS this time, and seek for comments and hopefully to have some working group consensus to have it adopted. That's the plan. But then there are also backup plans, and one of that is to create a separate OTN augments based off of network slice to to do two arguments. The OTN slice model, we could do that in two steps. One step, the first version is to only implement the connectivity-based network OTN slices, and that can go along with the working group process. When the concept of slice topology is accepted, then we could have a V2 version of the OTN slice to add the that capability for slice topology into the model. Yeah, but as I said, the preference is still to seek for working group adoption for the network slice topology, so we can keep a single model for the OTN slice. Next one. Yeah, so the next step is to address a couple of open issues. And the main issue is primarily the working group adoption of the network slice topology, so we could keep our plan as planned. And also the other part is to continue working with the network slice MBI Yang and align the two models if needed. Although I understand for the NSMBI, we are kind of ready for working group last call, right? Yeah. And then here's the GitHub repo, and we have a weekly call on Thursday, 10 to 11 Eastern time. So anyone is welcome to join the call. I think that's it. Next page. Right, that's it. Questions, comments? More than welcome.
I have one. So do you think there is any reason why this wouldn't work or adopt the network slice topology? Because that's something that is needed also for generic slices, so non-OTN specific ones, but slicing in packet is something that in any case needs the network slicing topology, right?
Yes, that is what we would think. And also, as you see from the latest mailing list discussion in TEAS, I think Luis and Adrian had a lot of comments on that, right? So one of the main argument about this is how much capability we would want to give the customer to customize for example, the service path for the connections of a network slice, right? And in our view, I mean, the best way to do that is to support with a customized topology. And not only that, but also there are other benefits, and there are some use cases that we are describing that it may be to the benefit of the customer, of a network slice customer, to use a topology to express their intent and to actually save resources that they can pay for of a network slice.
But in any case, even if the model is not used to provision the slice, in any case, it can be used in read-only mode to understand where what is the topology of the slice in the worst case, right?
Yeah, I mean, in some way, this customized topology is not like a replacement of the existing mechanism. It's a complement, right? It's an optional part if a customer wants to play with the notion of, I want to define a customized topology in order to reserve resources, then I can play around with it anytime I want, but with the thing in mind that I have already resources available for me. So I can activate at any moment, right? I mean, this concept is not new. It's in the past we have the ACTM VN thing, and also I think in OIF there is this notion of VN. I couldn't remember the VNTS or virtual network thing. That all sits around a topology for resources. So yeah.
So let's see how things go in TEAS, and
right.
eventually we will decide how to proceed. Obviously, the best The preferred choice is to have the generic thing done in TIS, and then we do just the specific one.
Yeah, this is still the hope.
Other questions? Thanks a lot. We are surprisingly perfectly on time. Let's see if we can keep with that.
Cool. Hi, thanks, Daniele. So I can just ask you to forward the slides. I don't see the controls. Great. So this is just a quick update on the FlexiGrid documents that we have. So we have the FlexiGrid topology and the FlexiGrid tunnel. And if you've been following the FlexiGrid work, you know that over the last couple of IETFs, we've essentially gathered some additional requirements, which meant we needed to pause some of the discussion so we could see if we can service the requirements with the current Yang model. So essentially, the key requirement here is to have a multi-technology view for a single instance. And that actually doesn't just affect the FlexiGrid topology. As most of you know, we have several documents that are all interconnected, and I will highlight these. Next slide, please. So this is the use case. The orange line is essentially our single instance. So it's a single topology, a database that's derived from our Yang model that shows essentially 8 nodes with a variety of interfaces, which are representing different technologies. In this case, we've got WSON with a GMPLS control plane, and FlexiGrid also using GMPLS. Now, if I wanted to model that environment, I would previously have had to use multiple Yang models, which would obviously create a significant amount of state in a large network with lots of nodes. So we revisited the original requirements and looked at this new requirement of how can I have a single instance that not only is providing a topological view of WSON and FlexiGrid, but potentially several other FlexiGrid technologies that we're also working on. So we've just saw the OTN slicing draft. We've got Ethernet, and we've even got microwave as well that we needed to sort of consider here. Next slide, please. So the good news is when we presented the work at the previous IETF in Yokohama, we were sort of slightly concerned that there was going to be a sort of significant amount of updates that would affect several documents. Well, actually, the modeling work itself provided, well, eventually became pretty straightforward. And in fact, there are just a few updates. And if you were to look at a diff of the current FlexiGrid topology model versus the previous version, you can see the changes in the tree and also the Yang code, and they're not significant. They're relatively minor, and hopefully they'll be straightforward, and I'll walk through those code changes. So the good news is that we can indeed support different interfaces within a single instance, and obviously those different technologies will have a variety of specific characterizations, and attributes, whether it's sort of labels, bandwidths, etc. And this can also be used not only for the FlexiGrid model, so this new code, but it can also be used across several other documents. Next slide, please. So what documents have we updated before I get into the code and show you what those changes are? We've updated the FlexiGrid Yang, and also we plan to update the OTN topology document. I think there was a typo there. I meant to provide a slightly updated set. So actually, I believe it's only the FlexiGrid Yang model that's updated. I know that talking to Scott, there will be some changes to the microwave topo Yang model as well. I don't believe that document's been updated as yet. I believe that the changes have been pushed through the GitHub, so you can see those changes as well. And essentially, I can show you some of those changes a little bit later in my presentation. Queued to be updated will be the Ethernet client T topology, as well as, and that's a CCAMP document, and also we will need to update the T's Yang T MPLS document with these changes. Now, in addition to the topology documents, because we're now dealing with sort of merged technology Yang models, we'll also look to merge the WSON and FlexiGrid tunnel documents. Now, that's not shown here because it's specifically not a topology document, but just giving you a heads up there. I mean, we have mentioned it on previous calls. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, just really with the status of the work, I don't believe we're going to see significant pushback from the working group, because I think the vendors and the operators that have been sort of most interested in the work and familiar have been attending our weekly FlexiGrid calls, but we'd certainly like to hear from any other participant of CCAMP who might not be following the calls weekly, but will now have seen, or please go and check and look at the Yang changes to see if you're happy with those changes and if you have any concerns. There will be sort of several takeaways, I think, from the analysis work that we did, and then the subsequent development for the Yang, and then ultimately when or as we implement. These are effective sort of guidelines, you know, or best practices. Now, how we document those will be kind of interesting. Of course, in the document, we can sort of state the characteristics. Effectively, we're using sort of a container and then defining the technology type on the link, and then the various sort of technology-specific attributes. But there's some useful sort of descriptions and information that we might not include directly in the Yang, but we could sort of talk about with it within each technology specific document, or in this case sort of something like the FlexiGrid topology, the fact that it supports multiple technology. But I think we also need to kind of expand a little bit more, and this doesn't feel like it should be directly in the document, because not all documents, future documents potentially will want to refer back to the FlexiGrid Yang topology document. So that's just something that we need to consider. It's not an urgent issue, but it's something that we might want to consider for the future. And I suppose there's a little overlap here with you're sort of going off on a slight tangent with the Transport MBI team, because we're going to be publishing effectively recommendations, and I suppose we can sort of sit down and define the definition of recommendation, but whether we publish through a wiki or a GitHub, it's something that we kind of need to think about. We don't seem to have like an RFC light mechanism in the IETF, and I know this sort of topic's come up previously, but it does feel like a more pressing sort of need now, especially as we've got sort of two topics at this IETF. Both might benefit from some way of sort of publishing information that could somehow be archived and sort of used and referenced maybe in the future without having to go through this whole process of sort of a full fat RFC. Okay, parking that discussion for a moment then, we will continue to have our weekly calls. We now need to switch from the topology discussion because that's effectively sort of parked and solved, and now we need to move on to the tunnel. Of course, we still need to submit those additional technology topology documents that I outlined on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Sorry, I kind of kept these slides just in case we had some time, and I don't think I've gone over my time, so maybe I can just spend a couple of minutes talking about these changes to our Yang model and essentially the sort of the guidelines that we have. So next slide, please. So this is our use case. So you can see the OTN, but it could be FlexiGrid, it could be WSON, it could be Ethernet, it could be something else. Effectively, this sort of higher layer technology is running across our OMS link, physical link. So effectively, we have multiple technologies that need to be modeled in a single instance. Next slide, please. There's a variety of interfaces there, IDs, technology types, and then specific technology information as highlighted. So you can see our inheritance here. Okay, thanks, John. I will come back to that. John's just sort of posted a comment. Good. So now you can see our effectively our tree here with the different technology for our topology. So of course these will be extended in the future with new technology types. Next. Thank you. So we've now got our node type. So effectively this Yang has a network type, a node type, a link type, the termination point type, the label range, and the bandwidth. So effectively these slides just kind of talk through the Yang for each of those. So this is the kind of information that we would want to kind of expand and document, and then maybe have some examples of how it's used both for single and multi technology environments. So John's kind of pointed out there, well, you write an internet draft and just publish that, and maybe it expires, but who cares, because it's kind of archived. So yeah, I take the point. So you can see here for the node type or indeed the link type. We can go on to the next one. It's okay. I'm not going to spend too much time talking through these because that wasn't really the intention of this presentation. But you can see here that there are specific kind of gotchas, information about the network type, the node type, the link type, the termination point type, the label range, etc., and the bandwidth. So this is really what we kind of want to document, not just for FlexiGrid or WSON or microwave technology or OTN, but just in its general use as well. Next slide. And then actually you can go on to the next slide. I think it's the label range, and then it's bandwidth. Yeah. So oh yeah, next. Thank you. So this is a type that you wouldn't use for say microwave, but essentially it's relevant for FlexiGrid, WSON, and OTN as well. And obviously wherever possible, we inherit from earlier documents that sort of define specific types or special cases. And it's important to make sure that the work that we've done here with this Yang is backwards compatible as well. Obviously, we didn't want to break anything, and we want to make sure it's consistent and the usage can be applied to all the different technologies. And I think just the final slide will show you the bandwidth. And again, it's very straightforward. But again, you could perhaps look at the T document, but essentially there'll be some sort of CCAMP technology specific information that we'd have to document, that of course would be in the WSON / FlexiGrid topology document. But again, whether it's an internet draft or a wiki, we'd want to describe how it's used in a multi-technology instance. Cool, thank you. I think that was the final slide.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Adrian.
Yeah, hi, Adrian Farrell. Dan, I know I should pay attention to what you do, but sometimes I don't. So this sort of usage guideline stuff, I'm seeing a bit of smudging of the boundaries between what T's would be saying and what CCAMP's saying. So, it's clear that if you've got something you want to talk about that is only applicable to the sub-IP technologies, that's fine, it lives here. But things like T-link bandwidth are surely T's type things. And maybe if you're going to put together some Yang guidelines here, you need to do a joint piece of work with T's and put it in a joint place.
Yep, I think that's a valid comment. This is probably the least sort of CCAMP specific type of those sort of 5 or 6 types that we've got, but I certainly take the point. There was a great sort of document the guys wrote in T's sort of the tutorial, effectively the T modeling tutorial, and it's almost like we need to update that, or effectively have sort of a CCAMP equivalent that builds on that document.
Yeah, exactly. Please.
Hi, so Iwa here. So following your comments about the continuing work on tunnels and for WSUN and FlexGrid, I wanted to point out, like, once we have the capability to have multi-technology single instance topology, it could bring us new opportunities of creating, say, a tunnel that spans across multiple layers of network technologies, rather than having a single, multiple, overlay, underlay tunnels, etc. I think the same for path computation, where we could create a path computation for end-to-end services across multiple layers. I think we can probably keep this in mind when we design the converge the WSUN and FlexGrid tunnel.
Cool. Yeah. No, I think that's a really great point. And from an operator perspective, the less amount of state that needs to be modeled and maintained is obviously a good thing. And that it seems like this is not only sort of innovative capability, but it also reduces the operational sort of burden from a provider, an operator perspective. And it's very easy through an analysis to say, this is how you would model things previously, and this is the amount of Yang code that you would use, and this is the size of the database for X n number of nodes versus this sort of new approach. Cool.
Regarding how to document this, the problem that we saw with the draft is that it's something that probably would find some pushback if we asked to make it become an RFC. If that doesn't become an RFC, and we need to keep it alive and renew it every 6 months. So that's why we were considering the wiki as an option. But I mean, that's something that we will figure out. Time for the next presentation, which is microwave topology. Okay.
Okay. Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, I'm Italo Busi from Huawei. I'm presenting on behalf of the co-authors and contributors the status of the microwave topology Yang. Next slide, please. Okay, the document has passed working group last call. We got some few comments and there is a resolution underway. So the main next steps into implement the changes in the draft. And most of these changes are just updating the Yang. One is to align the micro topology model to the, let me say, guidelines that we discovered during the discussion on FlexiGrid presented before by Daniel. Next slide. So the changes are basically exactly the changes that are needed to support the multi-technology. So the microwave link where they can coexist with other technology links. So we are going to add a presence container to indicate whether the node is microwave or not microwave capable, whether the TP and the link are microwave or not microwave. We got a comment about a range for an attribute, which was not very clear whether it was from 0 to 99.9 or 99, and we agreed to remove the range because it can be longer than outside of the range. We had some mandatory true to force when there is a micro link to describe whether it is a radio link or a carrier termination. There is no other option if it is a micro link. And we discussed on the bandwidth. We noticed that there was also some discussion in this. And we agreed to align with the other RFCs in IETF, so to describe the microwave bandwidth in UINT64 with bits per second, because kbps was not very clear whether it was bits or bytes. And in many cases, we noticed that it's bits per second rather than kilobits. Next. Okay, so the plan now is to continue the work on the two drafts that have been carved out for the bandwidth availability and for the interface reference, so to allow navigation between the topology and the interface model. And we will have continue our weekly calls on Thursday at 5 to 6 UTC. And and then there is a new work upcoming. We have not yet a draft ready. It's a BIS for RFC 8561. We got some comments from some operators, and we started to address some of them to see how to update the interface, macro interface. We have some work done in the GitHub, but it's not yet ready to publish it as an ID, so we have not published it. We have the RLT model, which describes how many working and protection carriers are present, have been updated to align with what we are doing in the topology, which is more flexible than the current solution. And we are discussing about possible enhancements in the description of the latency, fade, the BIR, and power consumption, which are comments that we received from my operators on the current model. And we hope that we can have a draft which can be ready to be presented in next IETF. Thank you. That should be all.
Yeah, when I get anxious because we are late on the agenda, I see you on the stage. I'm confident that you put us back on track. Any questions to Italo? Thank you. Thanks from Scott as well. And it's now time for network inventory. Will you be presenting? Okay, perfect. A short intro before you start. So probably you noticed that we have a new working group in the operations area, which is called the Ivy, which will be working on a common base model for inventory. Most likely, a part of the model that is today in this draft will need to be carved out and be used as the basis for the common model. As we anticipated many times, we decided to adopt this draft in CCAMP, even if we were aware of the fact that there was material that didn't belong in CCAMP, because there was a lot of hype, a lot of energy, and we didn't want to stop it. But I mean, just to be conscious that part, or better, don't be scared or offended if we will ask you to move some part of the document out.
Okay, thank you. I'm presenting on behalf of co-authors and contributors. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next slide.
Thank you for asking me,
okay,
for calling me Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. Yes, Chairman. Okay, we will focus on this presentation on what we have done and what are the open issues on the draft, and we will see in the Ivy working group what can be done to make it base. And so the major changes that we've done from the last IETF, we discussed a little bit how to describe the components location, because on FTR547, which is describing a pattern string, which is based on rec, subrec, shelf, and port identifiers. And we noticed that this string is quite commonly used in the optical networks, but can be generic, can be used also outside of optical networks. But we didn't want to constrain everybody to use this string. So we said, okay, we keep the location is a string from a syntax perspective. You can structure the way you like, but we describe this possible structure because it's quite commonly used in the network. We have some terminology mismatch. In the optical domain, there is usually they speak about shelf, while in our model we use a chassis, which is a more generic term than just shelf. So we keep chassis as the term in the Young model, but in the string we align the shelf to have a commonality between the other models and technologies, but we clarify in the table that the shelf is basically a chassis component from in our document. And we also clarify that the keyman room and rack are optional to be reported. There are some cases where they are not known by the controller, so you can only report what can be discovered, which is the network elements. So, because sometimes this information can be fed manually to the OSI system. We have seen some scenarios where this information is known by the controller and provided to the OSI system, some cases where this is not known and provided manually by the operator. So it's optional. Next slide, please. Okay, we had some discussion about the cases where we have, well, the REX belongs to the network element and possible changes to the model. For example, to have a navigation between the REC and the stack component. And after some discussion, we noticed that in this situation, we usually is only one REC, which only one shelf. And there are situations where the stack is a component, is not really a physical REC, and the location of the REC is a logical position within the network element. So we will introduce the description of the stack component into the draft, which is already in the Young, but not described within the draft. And it could be physical or logical grouping of chassis, but we will maintain the navigation between the equipment room and the network elements will be done based on the shelf. And we discussed the modeling for the, so we will have to add so we need to add the description of stack. Then we discussed the modeling of pizza boxes. A pizza box can be seen as an equipment with only one shelf. So we can, in this case, and this shelf can be in the rack or can be located, for example, on a table within a equipment room. So we will need to have the possibility to have standalone shelves which are not in the rack within the network element, and the navigation is still between the shelf and the chassis. We need to work out the detail of the example, but we have some discussion. There was some discussion about cases where the network element is a single board network element. The feedbacks we got was that this is a very corner case and not to be supported by the model. So we decided not to update the model to support this corner case. Next slide, please. Then, okay, there is some discussion, especially in the context of the generalization, that the equipment room is more specific. We need something more generic, and we are having some discussion. Maybe we need to replace the list of equipment room with something more generic, like a list of sites, which can have also a hierarchical association, because sites can be, for example, a building, can be a campus, can be a building, and can be an equipment room. And the building is inside the campus, the room is inside the building. So we can make a generic concept like the site, which has a recursive relationship between them. And maybe we can focus in the first version to have a quick delivery only to type an equipment, a site which is of type equipment room. And then, since it is extensible with an identity, we can add new type of sites in the future updates to the model. Next slide. And there is some requirement also to have some time stamping. So to retrieve, when you retrieve the information about the inventory, to a timestamp that says when the information was first discovered and when the location where the information was lastly validated. Because sometimes the problem, especially with the information which is manually configured, it gets outdated. So you think you have something in the field, but actually it's not there, or you don't know there is some, and that's, so there was a requirement. There is still some discussion because the requirement is not fully clear. So we are, this is an open issue we are working on to figure out which timestamp to put and whether we should put any notification out of it. Next slide. Okay, that's all. Okay, so now the plan is to see what can be moved to the IV working group, and we are still working to get more input from the IP and microwave technologies. We think the model is generic as it is, can be used for optical IP and microwave devices, but we need more most of the people working on the draft are coming from optical. So we need people who have this expertise of how those devices are designed to validate. And then we are going to work more on the component-specific attributes in the component list, and continue to work on the pending issues that we have on. We are tracking this on the GitHub, which is under CCAMP nowadays, and we keep having a weekly call on Wednesday at 4 p.m. European time, which are open calls. Anybody can join who is interested to contribute. Thank you. That's all.
A question on the timestamp. Yeah. So I was thinking of the information that is manually provisioned. Wouldn't it be useful to add a parameter that says this is something that was manually introduced, because that's something that most likely was defined timex and then never changed again. So it's something that might be considered outdated, but it's not, because it's something that was manually provisioned and not updated.
Yes, the way the module structure is typically, this information is the key room and the Rex, because the network element doesn't know where it is installed. So this is something you write it down somewhere, maybe in the network element or in the controller or in your OS. What typically you discover is the network element automatically discover what are the boards and what are the ports that are plugged in. But yeah, so I think at this moment in time, the model is structured such that the discoverable, we call it discoverable, non-discoverable information, are on different part of the tree, but maybe we can look at if there is something which maybe it's worth having an attribute, or just clarifying in a draft the two parts of the tree.
Okay. Any other question? You're saving them for Ivy. Good.
Thank you.
So we have an on-the-fly modification to the agenda, because Oscar should be the next presenter, but he was presenting in two different working groups at the same time. So if he asked if it was possible to swap his slot with Dan. So Dan, if you are ready, we can anticipate your presentation, your slot.
Sure, no problem. Great, thanks, guys. So this is a shiny new draft. Gosh, was it really that long? The title: Integrating YAN Configuration and Management into an Abstraction and Control of TE Networks, aka ACTN, System for Optical Networks. Whew. Next slide, please. So we know, well, hopefully we all know what ACTN is. We've been working on it for many years now, and essentially it's a method for abstracting connectivity and available resources from sort of lower layer technology domains through a series of functional components, PNCs and MDSCs, that will allow customers to access and request services via CNCs, so lots of 3-letter and 4-letter acronyms. But essentially the point with ACTN, it's really sort of abstraction of network resources, and allowing sort of customers that may be within a service provider / operator environment or externally, sort of application content OTT type providers who want to access network connectivity through third parties. And what the original sort of ACTN discussion and series of documents never really addressed actually was some of the fine-grained management requirements, because it was not really a consideration for us, although we did talk about some sort of device level and sort of traditional management features, it really wasn't the priority of the original framework and various documents since then. But we know that several standards organizations have a variety of architectures and frameworks and things like FCAPs for fault configuration, accounting, performance, security, etc. And we never really applied those to ACTN. So why now? Next slide, please. Why do we care now? Well, we care because some of our earlier discussions around the applicability of this technology, essentially the framework, and then deriving functional components into an architecture for, say, packet over optical, for instance, we start to care about not only exposing capability, but also managing and operating and troubleshooting that connectivity that a customer has requested and is currently using. Now we created a new document, which was the ACTN POI assurance document, and if I remember correctly, it was a T's doc document. Oh yes, we've got a slide in front of me, and that shows you the topology that we were using. And that document just started to kind of flesh out what APIs essentially we have in the IETF and which YANG models you might want to use when you're just trying to kind of maintain that connection that you requested and you're now consuming from a customer and an operator perspective. So, you know, there's a whole host of requirements from a sort of SLA, SLO type perspective. And obviously you've got customers that have certain expectations that have to be satisfied. So how do you kind of maintain that happy relationship with your customer from a sort of end-to-end, a layered and a potentially sort of component perspective. Now, of course, we have to decompartmentalize these into sort of different layers of the network, all the way down to the device level. But that's why we have sort of FCAPs capabilities. Next slide, please. But now, how do we kind of blend together ACTN and FCAPs? Well, actually, yeah, it turns out not only do I want to request a service from a customer A hat on, but I want to make sure that it's actually meeting my expectations, and hopefully the operator wants to ensure that in the event of a degrade of service or some kind of failure, or potentially identifying that if a particular link or node or interface degrades any further, then it may actually impact my service before my customer realizes that the service is impacted. So we started thinking about, well, what technologies do we have in the IETF? And then, well, how would I use those technologies? And there's a variety of things here. So there are obviously frameworks, then there's particular sort of interfaces. So there will be over the wire protocols, there'll be YANG models to use in those sort of messaging protocols, but there'll be gaps as well. And we're coming at this from a sort of a fine-grained perspective, a granular perspective, rather than sort of the abstract perspective that sort of the scope of ACTN really was originally designed for. And this document is just kind of the start of the journey, I suppose. It's like an investigation that was initiated from some of the service assurance for POI scenario. And we've kind of broadened it to, well, actually, it turns out there are other technologies that we may want to use ACTN for within sort of a CCAMP, i.e. An optical environment. So now we sort of thought, well, what would the augmented ACTN framework look like? Where would you have these types of interfaces? Would you want to apply policy? Because we think this is more of a sort of a policy-based approach rather than sort of intent, but maybe there is an intent to a policy mapping. So obviously intent is kind of your declarative, and that may be, hey, I want to ensure that my SLA is met, and then the imperative is, well, I need to now monitor these particular these end-to-end services, maybe technology domains, and maybe at some point through the PNC, specific links and interfaces. Well, yeah, maybe they're the same thing. So we have started, I guess, documenting what the augmented framework would look like, which interfaces we care about, what functions would be required, what protocols would we use, focusing obviously on IETF technology here, which Yang models exist, and then at some point we'll start putting examples in there. And if we identify that there are particular gaps for this type of capability, then we can start documenting the requirements, and then we might want to decide at some point, well, what do we need to do about that? Do we need new Yang models? Do we need augmentations to the framework? Do we need enhancements to a particular protocol? Next slide, please. Right, well, I think I may have just summarized in the sort of the previous verbiage. Much more investigation needed. Already, I suppose people might make the point that this type of capability and these functions not only apply to optical networks, they may also apply to packet as well as sort of other technology. Yes, I kind of agree, and that's some of the initial comments I've had back from people. Although people are shy, I was hoping to get some feedback directly on the list, but instead I've got sort of 4 or 5 unicast emails that have come privately to either myself or Adrian. But it seems that people are interested in the work. So, happy to take questions, comments, accusations at the mic. I suppose that's everything I want to do for this presentation, is just kind of to highlight the work and hopefully have people read and comment on the document. Given though that we've had sort of at least 5 people comment either to Adrian or myself, if it is something that the working group wants to work on, then I would not be adverse to sort of early adoption of this, but that's obviously up to the chairs.
I have a question, Lan. So you put there a figure where the FCAS was basically coming from the PNC. So would not make sense to collect the FCAS capabilities directly from the MDSC?
Yeah, I think it could be both, depending on the scenario. So typically the left, that's the OSS, what you might traditionally see in your network with your legacy umbrella NMS, and then maybe sort of EMS specific capabilities. So the main controller here would be in EMS, a more sort of traditional vendor specific or technology specific device. But what we see is that maybe the MDSC will have a policy request that would use some kind of augmentation or enhancement to the MPI that would also provide sort of FCAPS-like capability. So instead of having to operate sort of an ACTN-based network and maybe a siloed sort of separate OSS legacy EMS or NMS specifically for FCAPS capability, we would actually start migrating function from the traditional EMS NMS into sort of an ACTN-based system.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we need to clarify that picture a bit more.
Oh, okay. A second question on the picture, going also in the same direction, is that you somehow depicted the OSS as something monolithic, let's say, but we could have the different instances, no, for depending on the type of PNC. You saw in another figure the optical PNC, the packet PNC, so probably will be also different OSS.
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it depends on who you talk to, and obviously you know far more about sort of operating the operational aspects of the network than I do. But certainly talking to people and some of my experiences, some operators will have sort of an umbrella NMS system that then kind of talks to sort of vendor specific EMSs. At least they are kind of coordinated. But then, as you've just pointed out, there are other systems that are completely siloed. So you'll have something which is responsible for a packet network or /domain, and then a completely different system for your optical, and maybe even you can slice that. Well, let me refrain from using the word slice, but separate that into different OSS systems, completely sort of separated, although joint via sort of human capabilities for your WDM and maybe your OTN network, because they're not, there's no sort of overriding operational support system.
Okay, thank you.
A question on the relation of the work with the different other activities, different working groups, etc. So we have the assurance work, which is being done in TIS. How does this relate with that? In the sense that, is this the technology-specific part of that work, or
yeah, it's a really good question. This work, partly this work has been motivated because of the ACTN POI service assurance. So I see them as kind of concurrent, but I think this particular draft it needs to be matured, it needs to be developed, so we've got sort of results that we can then bring back to the ACTN POI work in TIS.
Adrian?
Yeah, it's Adrian. I think that's a really important question, Daniele. And I think we need to make a slightly bigger piece of ASCII art to show where the service assurance fits into this picture, because to me it fits in above and at the MDSC, and this is clearly below and at the MDSC. So maybe it's all supportive. And then the other pieces that we need to pull in, the incident management work that started, because certainly a chunk of this FCAP stuff is the incident management. But a piece of it's inventory. Okay, so Dan and I have got a bit of history here of opening boxes and discovering that inside are a huge number of worms that have to be carefully pulled out, lined up, and turned into ASCII. Fortunately, straight line worms are really easy in ASCII. The other piece is, the non-optical part of this, and we certainly started thinking about this from the very traditional transport network, where the FCAPS type of things in the transport network are very well defined, well known, and they're less well defined in the packet world. But we should probably go and sit with some of the IPPM people and BFD people and start saying, so does that fit? Should it all be in one pot, or should packet be actually very separate?
Well, speaking about assurance, if I'm not mistaken, the assurance architecture has just been published in the OPSA working group, right? Oscar?
No, I just was, Oscar Telefonica, I just was going to say that also align the work with OPSA, because there's some assurance draft there, and I don't know how are they related, because they work in creating this concept of the assurance graph that you send whatever entity creates the service, you decouple the entity that is doing the assurance with the entity that is in charge of configuring the network, even, for example, doing restoration, completely decoupled, and one talks to the other. So maybe that's creating a new interface that maybe needs to be done, I don't know, here, aligned with OPSA, but at least we should align with OPS, the overall architecture.
We are pretty skilled in starting work and then belongs to other working groups. Oscar, since you are standing, no, you have another question. Italo,
Yes.
sorry.
Oh, no, just a comment. The CTMPO assurance is more focusing on the multi-layer aspects. What's going to happen when you have a failure on the optical network impacting the IP layer? So it's, in my opinion, is a little bit complementary. I agree with Adrian. It's a little bit above, and it's going to look about what happens if you have a problem in the optical network that is affecting the IP network to make sure that you know where is the problem. While here is a little bit more. Looks to me, I have a little bit wider scope, but focusing on the PNC.
Few lines in the drafts to explain about the relationship, in my opinion,
Yeah.
would prevent any confusion in the future.
Okay. Yes,
that would be great. So, Oscar, let me pull up your slides. Pluggables. Sure.
Okay, good. I think we'll say now good afternoon. Now we are gonna jump to a slightly different topics, and now our dear MPLS routers have pluggables, and they have colored pluggables, so we have optical in the routers, and now we are gonna discuss the applicability of ACTN to this packet optical integration. So here the work is now a collaboration between a couple of operators, Vodafone and Telefonica, and several suppliers here. So we are going in that good direction. So go on to the next slide, please. So first, how does it relate to existing work? So as you know, in TIAS, we have been working in the scenario, in the more classical scenario, overlay scenario, where we have, on the one hand, the packet network, the routers with their MPLS, just taking care of sending packets, and overlaid with the optical network, which just care about the transport. And there, for that scenario, this is we use the ACTN architectures, doing the inventory, the service, the topology discovery, and we cover some use cases like, for example, the provisioning of layer 3 VPN, which is a very common use case in the packet world, with traffic engineering requirements that involve the relation with the optical layer. Then that was split it in two. One part taking care of the assurance, but here by assurance we really mean what happens when there is a failure on a degradation and acting on it. Okay, so it's a particular type of assurance and the failures of the equipment. And then we have this draft, okay, which is focused on the pluggables. Okay, so here the particular thing is that now the optical transmissions starts in the packet device, but the scenario is similar to or the kind of network is similar to the one that we referred at the beginning with the routers. Only that now we started there. So this is why we created this separate draft, and we believe that CCAMP is the right place to work on it because it has more optical than packets. So can you go to the next slide? So here, what are the changes to the previous version? We incorporated Nokia and Telefonica to this one, and here we added another option to here. We entered into the architecture discussions, and here we have two options that we are going to explain later. One is what we call the dual SVA management, and the other is single SVA management, that we are just going to discuss it now and just working the use case description and terminology. So here in this version, we have not yet done anything about young models yet. Okay, so just the architecture. So reference, okay, which is the kind of network that we are talking about. So as we mentioned, we have the routers, the packet routers, and we have them as we are incorporating the optical transmission there. We consider it as a packet optical node, and then the rest is a regular optical network as we have with the optical node, the ROADM, and so we assume that the optical layer is able to provide at least media channels end-to-end. Of course, it can also provide the full optical connection, but at least we are assuming that the spectrum switching is performed at the optical layer. And optionally, on here, the coherent pluggable, the transmission is in the packet optical node. So once that reference network is clear, go to the go to the next slide. Here, in this type of network that we have made this introduction, we will have what we call the IP link, which will just be that two interfaces in the IP routers have an IP address that allows that a packet is sent at IP level from one to another, that they have an Ethernet link. So that means layer 2, if you send one layer 2 packet, it will reach the other. And this is the new thing, that there is an OTSI link. So there is a signal that starts from one router and terminates in the other router. Then we have the link that connects this coherent pluggable interface that is to the port in the optical line system. So we had a lot of discussions at the very beginning on how to call this. The best term that we got was interdomain link, okay? Thinking that one is the packet domain and the other is the optical domain. This is why we said interdomain. At the beginning we call it interlayer, but we said it's not layer anymore. So we had some discussions there, but in the end we agreed to keep it as interdomain. And then between OLSs is the media channel. Okay, so that's regular and aligned with the standard optical. So can you go to the next slide? So once this is agreed, we have on the one hand the option, what we call option 1. This comes from the set of operators defined in Intel Telecom Infra project that defined which are the potential architecture that we would like to be explored. And in this first one, the particularity is that the packet controller and the optical controller both have access to the information of the packet node. Okay, so all of the telemetry information from the packet node regarding the optical is being accessed by the optical controller. So the optical controller knows all the OSNR or the other parameters or all the pluggable details. But in terms of configuration, we only allow the packet controller to really touch the device. So every device is touched only by one controller, even though information is allowed in the optical. Okay, so next slide, please. And the second one is even we don't allow the optical controller to access that information. So all the information will have to go through the communication between packet controller and optical controller, and in the ACTN architecture, it will go through the multi-domain controller, so to the hierarchical, via the hierarchical level. So in these options, as you might guess, you will have more interactions. There will be we will need to define more the interfaces between the different elements because we don't have this direct access of the optical controller. Here, we don't have in this draft option 3. Okay? There is another draft around there that has an option 3 that control that there is a completely that the optical controller also configures that. But here it was for us as operators, and we will see later why we didn't want to go to that option. We are only considering by now these two options, and by now we are not closing any of them. So this is why also we want to work here in IETF to work in it. So can you go to the next slide? So analyzing both options, we think that they are doable, but why do we think that only the packet controller should be able to touch the router? So first of all, is just to avoid any kind of race conditions. Okay, so we want that when accessing the device, there is only one entity that manages. Okay, it can come order to him by several to do several things, but he will manage the access. So then we will avoid any kind of blocking. We know that we have NACAM for that. We have the protocols that could, in theory, block different parts and allows us, but we know that the common thing, at least in IP, is to block configuration, do whatever changes, unlock it. So having two entities working at the same time, we think it can lead to synchronization issues. Then the state of the pluggable. So it is not really independent, even if you can say, okay, it's completely independent. Okay, we modify the optical, we modify the modulation format, we modify the bandwidth. Okay, the router needs to know that there is a new bandwidth. Even the pluggable has the client part, okay, that is internally to the router. Even in the client part, you even can create multiple interfaces. So it is completely coupled. So in the client part, you can do everything, for example, the 400 in one, or you can do 100 interfaces. You can, if you modify the bandwidth, it will impact also that part. So they are coupled. Even we can think they can be fully decoupled, but not always is the case. Okay, there could be some things. Okay, if we maintain, for example, the bandwidth that we are offering, maybe just the optical part could be completely independent. Okay, that there are some part that could be, but there is some relation. Also, in terms of devolution, we think it's better not to have that the owner of the pluggable control is just the optical router, the security. So again, having multiple entities accessing, it creates more security problems. We know we have NACAM, okay, so we know NACAM could solve part of the problems by saying, okay, this part of the tree, of the young tree in the device, is for one, another is for the other, but it has its limitation, NACAM, also it's not perfect, okay? So here we avoid any security problems, and also we have cases where we have multiple OLSs, okay? So and then who is the control from one of the line systems or for the other line system? Okay, so then we avoid from none of them. Okay, so it's for the packet, and also in the work that we have done so far in the ACTN architecture, it was more aligned with this option. Okay, we never had this real pure dual management. We never had it in IETF. So I mean, it will be a little bit more complex if we want to that option. So can you go to the next slide? So just how much time do we have?
And not that much. Maybe
okay.
We can.
Just they have a set of use cases here for that's supporting the environment discovery, network discovery, end-to-end service provisioning, provision the optical circuit from the router, augment a lag, so we can have one interface and we can add capacity to that lag, do optical restoration from the router, and perform network maintenance. So can you go to the next slide so we can have time? So here we want to update the draft with the proper IETF terminology. We know it's complex. Okay, here we are mixing worlds. Okay, we are mixing the packet world and the optical world together. We want to prioritize the use cases to work with, and maybe add some extra use cases. Align also the terminology with the ACTN draft. Try to involve more operators and more implementers in the discussion, and especially start working in the details. Okay, so which are the young models that we need to use in all of these interactions, and are there gaps for them? And if there are gaps, okay, which are the extensions, if needed, okay, to make the workflows that we have identified. Okay, so in the draft we have identified a set of use cases. Each of them has a specific workflow, so we need to work in them. So we believe this is a very hot topic now. The coherent pluggables have come in the industry. They are there. So I think IETF needs to deal with it. If IETF does not deal with it, there will be others that working with it. So I think this is the best place to work in this and work in these details. So questions?
So Reza, please.
Reza Rukui from Siena. If you go back to slide 8, the 8 and 9, starting with the 8, in my opinion, can you go to slide 8?
Isn't this one?
This is the number is
option 1.
Ah, okay.
So there are two options. So in reality, both options should work together. There is no either or, but rather, combination of both. Another thing about both approaches, let's start with 8, for example. When you are creating the optical services, basically you're creating optical services from plug to plug. When you want to do that, there are lots of things that should happen beforehand, viability, planning, and lots of things that should happen. And in this topology, both of them actually, who is going to look at or who is going to take has the knowledge of the end-to-end services. In this case, we have to be conscious about that one. In this case, that the optical PNC is looking at the plug-to-plug, but in the previous one, there is no such entity. So another thing, if, for example, something happened to the optical plugs and router IP link goes down, how they are going to communicate? Who is going to tell through a router that, the problem is not your QoS configuration or something about the router, but rather optical. So there are lots of details here that we should be clear which entity in this architecture is looking at the overall system from the configuration perspective, and also which entity is looking at this from the telemetry and assurance and troubleshooting. So this should be very clear as we go forward. But anyway, both approaches has pros and cons, but generally we have to be conscious about that when we go and try to select one versus another and how we are going to address that. Thank you.
Hi, Oscar Iowa here. So I have some slight different opinions on the options, but we can wait until Nigel presented his options. But for the time being, let me ask you this question: so for the case that you have IP PNC and optical PNC managing the same IP routers, you say there are difficulties and you wanted to constrain this. But to me, it sounds a little bit not parallel, sort of like awkward, right? In that sense, are you open to consider options other than netconf YANG from the northbound? Maybe like a protocol would work better between the two devices. If you cannot serve this purpose with netconf and YANG.
Right now, we were thinking more in netconf YANG. I mean, of course, you could do the optical thing like there is. I know there is one approach of one vendor that has created like a second interface just for the a dual management interface just for the optical part. But
do you have something in mind?
No, all I'm saying is if netconf is not the best option, maybe a protocol could serve.
Everyone does netconf, that's why we chose a netconf.
Yes. Yes, it's like, okay, as I have the problem of race, I outsource it. Okay, it's optical is in a separate interface. It doesn't mess with the other. Yeah. Even if you create another protocol internally, you will have to deal with the pluggable talking to the two walls. Okay, so that you have it still. Even if you create another protocol, you will still have the problem.
Yeah, we have GMPLS.
Yeah. Of course, you could have the optical just with the GMPLS, but even there. Tell the routers now to support GMPLS.
Okay. So we would like to make a quick check on the interest of the working group on moving this draft as an altered draft forward. So we will set up a poll, right now. So you can express your interest if needed.
You tell me what I need to write. Is the working group interested in working on pluggables?
Yes, working in the pluggables draft. So it seems somehow is balanced. Okay. It seems to be a slight preference on working on that, but probably maybe we can take offline and see. Thank you.
It's flopping.
Yeah, it's flopping.
People moving from one to the other.
Okay, thank you, Oscar.
Okay. So again, I think the original presenter, Taude, has some problem with the internet, so I'm doing this presentation on his behalf and also on behalf of all the co-authors. So this draft is about defining a northbound interface to basically for the performance monitoring, management, and retrieval. So the major update we did for this version is we added YAM modules relating to PM interfaces with reference to the TMF MTOSI. We added a YAM module to retrieve the capability of resources. And also we added RPCs to support like operations like resetting or clearing the cached performance monitoring data for those resources. And also querying resources associated with a particular TCA profile. And then the other thing we did is to add a normative reference to the ITOT G.7710 according to the comments from the last meeting. Basically, the ITOT draft has a lot of definitions for performance monitoring, so we wanted to reference that and hopefully get alignment with the draft. Next page. Right. So as I said, the scope of this draft is primarily to define a northbound interface for the performance monitoring, management, and retrieval. And as you see, like the requirement is to align the capability with what has been specified in the TMF and TOSI interface. And basically the dark green is what we have done in the last revisions. And the one with the light green is what we are to support in this revision. We wanted to note that for this data model, it's not just a simple translation of the MTOSI, but we consider this as a supplement to address the missing capabilities for management in the optical domain and in the IETF space. And this is also very much aligned with the draft that I think Daniel and Adrian were presenting about adding this capability to the IETF models. And not only that, but we also try to harmonize this model with the existing IETF data models. For example, with the network topology and the inventory work, ongoing inventory work. So for this version, except for the iterator list interface, all the other MTOSI interfaces regarding performance monitoring are supported. And for the iterator interface, as to our understanding, it could be supported by using the ongoing development of the pagination mechanism for RESTconf in order to support a large amount of data retrieval and this is especially true for all the PM objects and data. Yeah. Next page. Okay, so here we define three interfaces corresponding to the TMF-M-TOSI specification, which allows the controller to retrieve, for example, a list of the performance data over a list of termination points, to retrieve the PM, the number of hours that we have PM data recorded in a PNC, and also a list of parameters supported by a specific network element. On the left, you will see the module that we propose, which is generic performance monitoring module with a list of resources. And this resource could be either physical or logical, right? So, for physical resources, could be a network element, it could be a port. And for the logical resources, especially in the IETF space, we could refer to a termination point, a link, and things like that.
Sorry to interrupt you. Can you close in a couple of minutes because we have yet another presentation and it's already 3.
Okay, I'll give it a try. Next page then. So these are the two RPCs that we defined about clearing and resetting the performance monitoring data, and also get a list of associated termination points according to the M-TOSI that can work over a large amount of resources in the network. Right. Next page. Right, so there are a couple of open points. And for example, there's a definition for layer rate in TMF and TOSI, and there are over like 200 plus values in the TMF document. But we couldn't find a matching attributes in the IETF space. So it remains open as to how we define it, right? How we describe this. And then also we need to align the TMF or the TMF objects with the existing ACTN objects defined in the current hierarchy. If we wanted to harmonize both the control and the management work, we need to do this continuously to make the alignment with the TMF specification. Next page. Okay, so what do we plan to do is to define PM indicators specific to optical networks in reference with the ITOT document, and we like to seek interest in a working group and call for working group adoption, and also for the joint contribution in the next phase. I think I saved the time well.
Thanks.
I won't be able to make up the schedule now because I have to go negative. So, hi, I'm Nigel Davis, Sienna. I'm going to present on this. It's actually an additional option to what Oscar presented. So you can go on to the next slide. I'll try and make it quick. Key thing, photonic controller has control of the photonic functions, including the functions in the packet and device, which is essentially, so the route is essentially split across the packet and photonic domains. So this is really emphasizing that. There's clear separation of concerns, which I think Oscar also agreed with essentially in the discussion he made here, but I'm saying we need to emphasize that. And I look at briefly in the draft at 3 control architectures, but I won't dwell on that. If you go on the next slide, actually, I'll try and do it very quickly. So pictures of, I really enjoyed the ASCII diagrams. Well, it took me back a long time again, so back to the beginning of my career. But anyway, so I've got some alternative architectures for networks here, but just emphasizing that there's an end-to-end setup and complexity in the setup, and the router straddles the two domains, so the photonic and packet domain. I've then broken down, the lower diagram shows a network device broken down, just showing the clear functional, logical separation of concerns. And I'm actually emphasizing that there are 3 potential ways into that device, 2 highly relevant ones. One's netconf, obviously, with a model on it. I could use open config over GNMI or something of this sort, but the other critical one is the control plane one, which also was talked about earlier. So I'm just emphasizing those 2 mechanisms as ways in. Do you go on to the next slide, actually? So what I've done here, I've just shown. So there's intentionally not a particular architecture selected. It's just emphasizing there are a number of control functions that relate to photonic network setup. So viability, optimization, and the capacity setup. I forgot to say on the first slide, basically there's also control of restoration here, and that's critical, because with restoration I might need to change the settings on the plug, and getting direct access to that plug is really important to be able to do that rapidly and so on. And the two architectures I've got, one just shows a cloud of functions, the other one just shows them in a traditional hierarchy with a partition between packet and photonic control. If you want to go on to the next slide, thanks. So what I'm showing here is just emphasizing that in that hierarchical setup, the photonic controller will control, there's no point in pointing, photonic controller will control directly the plug through one of those three interfaces, and the packet controller will control the packet parts directly through its interface. If you want to move on again. So, and we have got experience of operators demanding this this sort of split of operations, and we've also got experience of it working, so we know it can be made to work. And if you want to go on to the next slide. So the key question here is we're looking for support for this draft, i.e. the additional option, and the critical thing is direct control. And then of course I wanted to ask how to progress this. So, okay, so that's all I have.
Okay, so before jumping into which options, we needed to understand if the working group is interested in working on this or not. From the first polling, there is a little bit of ambiguity, but I mean, obviously this is something that we will take to the list. So apologies if we run a little bit behind the schedule, but there was a good discussion, so we didn't want to cut the lines. Moreover, this is not the cookies break, so we so we thought it was okay to steal 5 minutes of your time. Thanks a lot. See you in Prague. Helping the
mailing list was, no?
Yes, helping creating a mailing list for the how it's called, the TNBI design team. Okay, no problem. Okay. That was easy. Yeah. Yeah, and my